Okay, part 2 of the advent of the reliable auto handgun and the acceptance of that gun. I left off talking about this excellent gun, the Browning High Power, which goes way back to the 1930s, and it was used on both sides of the conflict in World War II. And I'm talking both Axis and Allies used it with great effect. But the Browning still failed to dislodge the revolver as a preferred handgun for both military and law enforcement agencies. And I was speaking to that as to why. Now, it was very reliable, especially with full metal jacket rounds, and also sometimes with hollow points, although there were, depending on the make and where the gun was manufactured, it would have problems with hollow points. But just like the 1911, it still employed that single action automatic design, which meant in order to carry it in a ready fashion, you would have to go condition 1, which means cocked and locked. Round in the chamber, hammer back, safety engaged. Can't see the safety in this picture, it's on the other side. That is a training issue. Also, it was heavy. Above 30 ounces, I think it's like 33 ounces for a Browning High Power, somewhere around there. The 1911 was even heavier at 38 ounces. So that didn't seem to be a huge issue, honestly, with armies of the world. I mean, they didn't really care. It was definitely a lot lighter than their main rifle. But as good as the High Power was, and is to this day, it still had some issues to the extent it did not completely open that door up for widespread acceptance of an automatic pistol. And how do I know that? Well, just go back to the 1960s and 70s. Did you see any U.S. law enforcement agency, a large agency, adopt the High Power? Well, there might have been a couple, but I don't know of any. And if that was the case, you would have seen High Powers in pretty much all the holsters across America. There were some in Europe. In fact, I think the SAS used the High Power for a number of years and loved it. So, great gun, but it still didn't dislodge the revolver. And again, with the revolver, what's so great about it? Let's go back here. Well, it just works, you know. Law enforcement dug it. Dirty Harry dug it because it just worked. And it worked with all types of bullets. Here you see some pictures of the different bullets. Lead round nose, semi-wad cutter, hollow point, wad cutter, FMJ, semi-jacketed hollow point. The revolver would shoot all those with, you know, boring efficiency. That's why the revolver remained in service all the way through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and heck, the 90s too. It was not dislodged in a large degree due to its simplicity and reliability. And I'm also going to show you something else. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod, bear with me. Remember I showed you the picture of Robin Olds in part 1? This guy, what a stud that guy was, is still alive, at least in 2008, in his 38 Special Model 10 Smith. Well, guess what? My dad was a Vietnam pilot too. And, bear with me while I bring this picture up, he too had the same gun. And here you're seeing a picture of my dad's gear when he flew as a combat pilot in Vietnam. Cool, huh? And you wonder where I get all my stuff from. I was raised by a dad who just knew gear. He flew over the Central Highlands in central Vietnam. Very dangerous territory with the loadout you're seeing here. This probably might look familiar to you guys because I did a review on a lot of this on the U.S. Air Force Survival Vest. There's a PRC-90 or its predecessor survival radio, Mark 240 flares. Oh, and there's, what do you know, a buck knife. Man, this picture was probably taken in 1968, maybe 1969. And that is very analogous, and actually that is a buck special, which has been in production for like, what, 47 years? My dad loved that knife. He also carried a Pathfinder. I think it was a buck Pathfinder. I remember as a little kid I used to handle those knives all the time, thinking how cool they were. No wonder I turned out the freak I did. There's 38 Special. You can't really see the picture, the gun that well, but it's there somewhere. This is kind of a grainy, scanned-in slide. That's why the quality's not super great. But you see his rounds here. Full metal jacket, 130 grain, 38 Special rounds. In the background, incidentally, there's an M16A1, I believe. He also flew with an AR-18 or 180, I forget. There's a strobe there. It's cool. There's some extra magazines. I think he flew with a minimum of, I think he said like 500 rounds in case he ever went down. A lot of his friends did go down in the Central Highlands. They were never heard from again. One of his buddies had a duel with a sampan over one of the deltas and he got shot down. Never heard from him again. Let me show you one more of the picture. Hopefully I'm not boring you with this. And I should have had this set up better. Here it comes. And there's Dad standing there, his OV-10. Cool picture. That was one of the planes he flew in Vietnam. He flew others. And again, we can see the loadout as he's wearing it. Sadly, Dad's not with us anymore today. Otherwise, I'd have him on an interview. There's a 38 Special Model 10 strapped. Why not a 1911? He told me why. He said it was because the 38 Special would go boom when you pulled the trigger. 1911, sometimes not so much. At least in the jungles of Vietnam. That's what he said. So I'll take his word for it. There's a survival vest. That OV-10 sure was a cool plane. Dad's standing right in front of it, but he had two 7.62 millimeter machine guns on the side of it. Dad used to say that was the stupidest thing they ever did, is put machine guns on an OV-10, because the plane, and I'm sorry to deviate from the subject, but it's interesting, the plane itself was designed as a forward air controller plane. In other words, marking targets with white phosphorus rockets. But as soon as they slapped some machine guns on there, the pilots, my dad was one of them, he said he had guys in his squadron that thought they were like attack planes, and they'd roll in on a sampan trying to gun them. And guess what? The guys would break out a heavy 12.7 heavy machine gun, analogous to a 50 cal, and shoot the Bronco down. So, just an aside. Anyways, there he is, and this was 38 Special that even in 1969, I believe the picture was taken, that it was the most reliable gun. At least that's what the Air Force thought then. So what changed that? Back on topic we go. Sorry for the aside. Back in the tripod we go too. What changed that are more modern designs. And you may have seen my review already. Sorry for the page turning. You may have seen my review on, again, the P7 by H&K. This was an outgrowth of the West German police issuing a requirement for a reliable semi-automatic pistol. And they had a bunch of requirements. I'm not going to go over them. But H&K, Heckler & Koch, came out and they produced this very innovative design, just like I said in my review, of that H&K P7 PSP pistol that had a lot of cool features. One of them, it was gas operated. It wasn't the Browning tilting design that we see in pretty much all designs now, Glock, SIG, Smith & Wesson. It was a gas design. That had some ups and had some downs. The downs made that area super hot after rapid fire, even after they put in the synthetic heat shield. But it was reliable, and it fed all kinds of bullets reliably. Part of which was due to the magazine fed almost near vertically in the hand grip of the gun. Therefore, the orientation to the round as it came up to the chamber was pretty much right in line. And it didn't have to contend with the feed ramp issues that the 1911 has. It was pretty much straight, so it was very reliable, very accurate, had a very low bore axis in hand. Had that kind of unusual squeeze cocker safety that some people hated, some people liked. But overall, the P7 was groundbreaking. And it started opening up that door of resistance to automatics in U.S. law enforcement circles. There was some, I think the New Jersey State Police adopted the P7. They still may use it, I don't know. There were several large agencies that used the P7 and loved it. It was a very durable gun too. It would last and last. So that was a very effective design that helped us move towards widespread acceptance. But it really wasn't until the pistol trials of the mid-1980s when the Beretta Model 92 was entered and it won the trials that things really started to change. And people really started to look at automatic pistols differently. That's not to say that the Browning was the first reliable automatic pistol. Well, maybe it is. I mean, Smith & Wesson actually goes back. I remember shooting some Smith & Wessons way back when, Model 59, Model 659, and pretty much all of them had the reliability issues. I'm not going to search for a picture of that. I don't know if I have one. But they all had reliability issues. And they were big and bulky and goofy. They just didn't win law enforcement over. There were some law enforcement agencies that did adopt Smith & Wessons and used them for a number of years. FBI was one of them. But it was a Beretta that really started to change things. Now, I'll say as an aside that I think the adoption of the 9mm by the U.S. military forces is not a super smart idea. That's because by Geneva Convention, we're constrained to use full metal jacket rounds. And in a 9mm loading, FMJs pretty much suck. They do not transfer energy. That's end of part 2. Part 3 coming at you. Nothing fancy.